Hello, this is Joe from Nerd in Korea. We are continuing our MTG keywords series with this time with Overload. I think Overload's a great one. Alright, and so what is this series about? In this series, we took a look at different keywords and mechanics introduced in different sets. This is fairly similar to Kicker, but there's an important distinction. So again, talking about Overload here. Finally, as usual, we will take a look at some of the best budget options this keyword has to offer. So we're doing a little budget here too. What is Overload? Overload changes a spell from a single target to all legal targets. It doesn't actually target if you pay the Overload, so I probably shouldn't have put target. That's a little confusing. Overload replaces the text in a card, which is an unusual ability for a card to have. A card that says replace the text in the card is, this might be the only thing that does that, I think. It's very close to, anyway. I think there are a few older blue things where you can like change all instances of a color to another color and stuff like that. But anyway, it changes target to each. So again, target if it's creature, for instance, target creature to each creature. So really, that's very important. If overloaded cost is paid, the spell no longer assumes to have targets. This is important as it means things like protection from color, Hexproof, and Shroud do not protect against it anymore. Again, all of these things will usually counter any kind of spell that is targeted. None of these work against this once it's overloaded because it's just hitting each. It is not target, it is each. So yeah, a great way to get around Hexproof and all that kind of thing. Sound familiar? This mechanic is very similar to Kicker, but they are very different. Both usually add an additional cost to improve the effect, so they are similar in that way. Kicker is called an additional spell cost, while Overload is an alternative spell cost. If any effect like cost reduction would apply to the alternative spell cost, it still works. That's one big difference. Kicker, unless something lets you pay the Kicker cost, doesn't work. I mean, it lowers the original spell cost, which may make it easier to pay the Kicker, I guess. But this, Overload, just automatically, all of it goes straight to the Overload. So if you have like Overload, say 3 red green, and you have 3 cost reduction, you can just cast it for a red green, and then you're done. So yeah, kind of more accessible. Kicker offers a wide variety of additional effects, while Overload is a consistent mechanic. So Kicker can kind of do just about anything. This is going to always, at least every time I've seen, just replacing that word of target to each, like every time. Yeah, it always does the same. Honorable mentions. Okay, so these are ones that people are probably most familiar with. Counterflux. Again, Counterflux can't be countered by spells or abilities. It's a counterspell that cannot be countered. That, I think, does come up. Counter target spell you don't control, and for its overload of 1 blue, red. Again, not a whole lot of extra cost for the overload on this one. It counters all spells. So just all spells on the stack are getting countered. Kind of a whirlwind denial effect. So yeah, it doesn't work on abilities though, which is unfortunate. But anyway, for 41 cents, it's a great option to have. If you've got it's something I would consider. Mizium Mortars. So for 1 or red, it'll deal 4 damage to target creature you don't control. That's what's important on this one. You don't control. So it won't, even the overload for 3 and 3 red, so very pricey overload, it hits everything you don't control for 4. Again, there might be a few things on the board that can survive that, but like any kind of token strategy deck, anything like that, they're just wiped out. It's done. Also, it's going to get rid of a lot of those kind of more bothersome ones that usually have like 1 to 3 toughness, I think. The ones that have like kind of the static abilities that are a pain in the butt. So yeah. Anyway, it will do a lot for 28 cents, yeah. Finally, Vandal Blast, I think is probably the most well-known Overload card. Destroy target artifact you don't control, and for Overload, destroy each artifact you don't control. So what's really incredible about that is the you don't control thing. Again, it specifies you don't control. Everyone else's artifacts, not yours. So yeah. Anyway, 196. 196 to destroy everyone else's artifacts for 5 mana. Number 5. Chemistar's Trick. So for a blue and a red, target creature you don't control is so important on these Overload cards. It's like the magic text on this. Or I guess, anyway. Get -2, -0 until end of turn. Okay, sure. And attacks this turn if able. Again, the regular cost is it, and then Overload is 3 is it. So for 5, you force everything else to attack, and you can just like sit back and like, especially if you've got Pillow Fort cards, you know, something like that, or Primilicon is what I would use this with, where you like make it so people can't even target you, right? They have to attack, and they have to attack that player beside them. That is just a really super powerful card in the right deck. Anyway, 5 cents. Number 4. Fangs of Colonia. Alright, so for 1 and a green, or Overload of 4 green. So 6 is getting pricey, but it's worth it. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, then double the number of +1/+1 on each creature that had a +1/+1 counter put on it this way. So your +1/+1, like Selesnya deck, for instance, is what I've got. I'm definitely putting this in my Selesnya deck. You put 1 extra +1/+1 counter and then just double them. So if they've already got a bunch, you're giving them this huge amount of like boost to your offensive power. It's even if all your creatures only get +2/+2, if you've got enough creatures, if you got like a token thing, probably still worth it, you know? It's multiple decks can you make use of this. It's not limited to the +1/+1 counters. It's very similar to a what's the word I'm looking for here? Yeah, Proliferate. It's almost like a better but more limited Proliferate is what I like. You can't do any counter, only +1/+1, but it's going to double them. Like you're putting 2 down, not 1. Minimum 2, right? The one you put on and then the extra. Or just a whole pile if you've already got some. Anyway, 12 cents. Number 3. Scale Up. Okay, this is actually like a low-key kind of wincon card, which I always like to have. I actually won a game with this this week. So yeah. Until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a green worm with base power and toughness 6/4. Or Overload for 4 green against 6. Overload cost is getting pricey, but all of your creatures are going to be 6/4 worms. The only downside I can see there is that, remember, any kind of Anthem effect or something, if you've got it for anything except worms, is going to end up just like disappearing, right? So if you've got like a maybe elf deck with a bunch of +1/+1 effects for the elves, as soon as you turn them all into worms, they don't have that anymore. So this kind of boost might not be as high in some decks as others. That's something to consider, but yeah. Anyway, 61 cents. Number 2. Teleportal. This is one of my favorites, personally. Alright, so for a blue and a red, target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn and is unblockable this turn. Overload 3, blue-red is it. So yeah, you're just making everything unblockable and giving it +1 damage. +1 damage is nice, it's not why you're getting this card though, right? with some kind of token strategy or something like that, that can actually be a lot. That +1 can make a big difference. But you can also use this with like big creature decks that maybe big artifact creatures, given that is it. So yeah, they'll just automatically get through. Unblockable is such a crazy good ability. Anyway, 8 cents. Oh, which keywords do you want me to cover? I'm always looking for feedback and ideas, so if you've got a keyword that you think is worth covering, I would love to hear it. Alright, and please hit like and subscribe as well, so we're on to our number 1. Bluster Squall. Tap target creature you don't control for 1 blue, or overload it for 3 in a blue. As overload costs go, that's lower as well, right? This is a mass board effect for 4 mana, not that bad. Anyway, so you tap all your opponent's boards. That is much better than just unblockable, right? It kind of has the same effect on your turn during combat, but it prevents people from activating abilities. It prevents... The main thing is that if the person last in rotation, if you're playing like a multiplayer game, they're going to untap last. So you're going to be ready with all of your stuff. Your blocker's all ready to go. The person beside you or across from you, they're going to have everything tapped down. So it's like for any other players, they're like, oh, do I want to attack the person that can block me and do a bunch of stuff? Or do I want to get just a free hit in kind of thing? They'll probably take the free hit. The person last in rotation after this is going to be in a lot of trouble. Anyway, 28 cents. The List. Okay. Chemister's Trick is 5 whole cents. Fangs of Colonia, 12 cents. Okay. So many decks can use that. Scale Up, 61 cents. Once again, super useful. Teleportal, 8 cents only. Even, I feel like particularly Scale Up and Teleportal are both cards that are almost like wincons, right? You can kind of use them as wincons anyway. Bluster Squall, another one that you can just finish a game with pretty easy. So many of these are just so insanely useful. Anyway, take it easy.